Hey guys, hope you're doing well. It's Uday here from the Vanguard team, and today we're going to touch on a really important topic, in my opinion, which is how do you guys reduce silly errors, particularly when it comes to VCE maths subjects. Now, a big difference between someone who gets a raw 50 and a raw 45 in a subject like general maths or methods is that even if you lose 1 mark on your exams, that can cost you 1 study score in terms of your final subject score. So if someone loses 1 mark, that might take you from a 45 all the way down to a 49. In other words, it's pretty cutthroat. And a lot of people tend to lose those tiny marks just through silly mistakes. So today, let's address how can we reduce those silly mistakes so that you guys can optimize your marks when it comes to your SACs and exams. Now, the very first thing that I recommend to all of you guys to do is to really ensure that you know how to use your highlighter. Now, the highlighter is actually an underrated tool, in my opinion, because you can use it to your advantage to point out any information which other candidates might be missing when it comes to the STEM. I'll give you an example. A lot of people lose marks on methods exams because they fail to acknowledge domain restrictions. So if you realize that, hey, this makes a big difference to the question, you can highlight those domain restrictions, and therefore you won't miss out on them when it comes to answering the below questions. So using your highlighter to point out those key pieces of information which are integral to answering the question is one way that you can avoid making those silly mistakes. The second thing that you guys can do is actually keep a log of those silly mistakes and literally keep a page in your bound reference, which is just a dot point list of all of the silly mistakes that you tend to make. So for me, what that included was stuff like forgetting the 1 on B minus A in the average value formula, forgetting the difference between dilations from the y-axis and dilations from the x-axis, and as always, forgetting about those cheeky domain and parameter restrictions. So make sure you actually keep a dot point list of that, because then throughout your exam, you can refer back to that list and remind yourself to not repeat those mistakes. Here's yet another tip that you guys can use now. Something else that you guys can do is you can also understand that checking your answers is super duper important when it comes to VCE math subjects. I mean, I remember for my very first SAC, after I'd gone through it in the first round, once I checked my answers, I'd probably save myself around 3 to 5 marks, roughly speaking, which is almost, like 5 to 10% of my SAC. Reason being, because I gave myself enough time to actually check through my answers. So that's something that you guys really need to consider is how much time are you actually leaving at the end of your assessment tasks? Are you finishing right on the dot? Or do you give yourself enough time to actually check your answers and make sure that you're not making those mistakes? That is a super important task, and even the top level scorers fail to practice that last step of actually redoing the test in the remaining time and verifying that their answers are truly correct. Ways that you can do that include solving the question in the exact same way, subbing your answer back in to check whether it fits, for example, into an equation, or last but not least, trying out an altogether different method to see if you reach the final same answer. So those are some of the things that you guys can do in terms of checking your answers. For exam 1, try to leave yourself with around 10 minutes to check your answer. Exam 2, once again, around 15 to 20 minutes would be ideal for checking your answers. Now, my very final tip when it comes to reducing silly mistakes applies to those of you guys who have tech active SACs. If possible, avoid doing working out by hand, guys. All of us, myself included, are pretty terrible at algebra, especially in timed conditions. So the last thing you want to do is play to your weaknesses and do a bunch of working out which most likely has some sort of error written in between it. I'm talking about silly things like missing the double negative or just reading a number incorrectly. The fun part is your CAS tends to not make those mistakes as long as you can type correctly. In other words, your CAS is more accurate than you because it's a calculator. So use your calculator to even do the basic maths. Even if it's something like -1 + 2. You'd be surprised how many people mess that up when you're stressed and you're worrying about the next couple of questions. Do all of that working out on your CAS, transcribe that afterwards onto your paper. So do the working out on your CAS first, then you can put that onto paper, and that way you can avoid making those silly mistakes, guys, and you can save those crucial marks. Hopefully that gives you guys some very useful and easy tips so you guys can save marks on your SACs and exams, guys. Best of luck.